Hello, everybody. Welcome to the June Literally Dead Book Club live show. We read You Know What You Did by Katie Nguyen. And just a reminder, thank you, Steph. A reminder of our July pick. We're currently reading Middle of the Night by Riley Sager. There will be a live show probably at the beginning of August. But today, we're going to focus on this. First, let's get into introductions. Steph has been here before. Jenny is new. So after you tell me your name and your channel and like a recent favorite mystery horror thriller, because that's what we're all here for, Jenny is then going to share the synopsis as our resident newbie. So in the chat while introductions are happening, feel free to share if you read the book or not. A heart is for read. The death skull one is for unread, or DNF. I feel like some people I've seen on the Goodreads, some people have DNF. So share your thoughts.
Hello, I'm Stephanie from Stephanie Bookish, and a recent favorite horror was Bloom. I think that's the most recent horror that I've given like almost 5 stars. I gave it a 4.5 when I first finished it, but I can't stop thinking about it. So I'm pretty sure it's going to be one of my favorite books of the year. Even though it has like a little bit of predictability about it, I still like it. So that was my most recent favorite horror.
Nice.
Hi, I'm Jenny. You can find me here on YouTube at JYT_creative space. I'm quite new. I started posting videos at the beginning of this year. You can also find me on Instagram at the same handle. And I've just last month, I started really getting into horror reading, and a book that really, really stuck with me was Chlorine by Jade Song.
Oh, yeah. I was just watching your vlog. I had to stop because you reviewed this one in it. And so I had to stop because I like to come into these live shows like fresh and not knowing anything. But I did watch the beginning, and you talked about Chlorine. And then you also read Bloom in that one, right?
Yeah, I did, because Stephanie was the one.
Right. I'm so glad that Chlorine worked for you. I gave it a 5 last year for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely, I didn't rate it, but I think now sitting on it, it's like a 5-star read for me.
It was really good.
Yeah.
Okay, now Jenny will pitch us this. I always tell people that they can share like the actual synopsis, like read it to us, that's fine, or in your own words. I believe Jenny has chosen her own words for reasons.
Yeah, I think the synopsis tells us a little bit too much, so I'm going to just go off with what I think is necessary. So at the beginning of the story, we open up with Annie losing her mother suddenly, and this major event kind of triggers her OCD, and she's slowly spiraling, and she's not sure like where she fits in her life. She's questioning herself as a mother, as a wife, and also has doubts of her relationship between her and her mother, because she's like haunted by these like criticisms that her mom used to give to her. And with her relationships unraveling, she suddenly finds herself as the prime suspect in a murder of one of her art patrons.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Perfect. I think I might have a question in here about the synopsis that I might have added just for myself because I wanted to like rant about it for a second.
Yeah.
I just think that the synopsis pitches itself so strangely because something that it talks about in the synopsis doesn't happen until the final like 70 pages of the book. And also it talks about like something about her daughter. It's like she'll do anything to save her daughter or protect her daughter. I just don't feel like that's what the story is either.
No,
and so I was expecting so much more to happen with her daughter, and it didn't. There was a lot to do with her daughter, but in a different way.
Yeah.
So I think what we should get into first, before any spoilers, is your rating and reasoning. Just like I love to do a one sentence just to gauge your overall thoughts. We can do that in the comments as well. And then we'll fully get into spoilers right after that.
I am still struggling with my rating. I think I've settled on a low 3. Okay. And I think that my general thoughts are I really enjoyed aspects of this book. And as someone with OCD, I resonated with some things. But then the ending kind of made me mad.
Oh, interesting. Okay. What about you, Jenny?
For me, I would say amazing atmosphere, but then just like really slow and slogging like plot. And I ended up giving it, I think, a low 3 as well. I could be convinced to give it a 2-star, to be honest.
I know. I came into this wondering, like, will it go lower?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. So let's first gauge the comment section. Oh no, first one I saw.
Oh, wow.
1.5. Okay, we've got a 3, a 2, a 4.5, a 2, a 2, 3s, 1s. We're really across the board, but this one is definitely leaning low. I haven't seen very many 4s or 5s. Trying to find them. There's a 4. I, of course, always hope that there's kind of a representation for everybody in the live show, like a host who has the same feelings as somebody. So everyone can feel represented if you hated the book, if you loved the book. I never want it to be like a roast session or a glowing moment. Like I want people to be able to really explore their thoughts. I too gave it a lower rating. I gave it a 2.75.
Okay.
I could be talked lower. I think my sentence is I enjoyed the family dynamics, like exploring the family dynamics, but it didn't make for a good story. And then I didn't enjoy the mystery, but that I think made for a good story.
Yeah.
And I will now get into spoilers so I can fully expand on what I mean. So I think this is a really traditional mystery, more traditional than I expected it to be. It's been done before. And it's not an inherently bad mystery to have like a confused main character for much of the book and uncovering that a character who is beloved by the reader or the characters to be the bad guy in the end. Like that's not, it's a good objective story, but I just found myself so uninterested in it. Yet the family dynamics were what I was interested in most. So I think there's a question at the end about like, will you read from this author again? And we'll just spoil that now because I would. But I kind of hope that she writes more literary fiction because I liked her writing and I liked her exploring generations of families. And it's not that I think she was unsuccessful in the thriller mystery plot, but just for me as a reader, like this didn't bring anything new or surprising to the table. So those are my thoughts on it.
It's interesting you said that about literary from her because I actually would really love her to explore horror more because the elements.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, like the elements with the dog and even her mom and some of the things that she was seeing, I guess. I was like, wow, these would be great horror moments. So I was hoping it would lean more into that, but it didn't.
Yeah, it's funny for me because I was thinking literary horror, like a more character study horror. And I think she builds a lot of great atmosphere and her characters. Like she really deep dives with Annie's character. And I feel like if she got to just focus on Annie, it would have been a better story for me, I think.
Yeah.
The very first question that I have is, I usually ask, did you have a favorite character? I don't find that this book lends itself to that. Finding favorite characters the way that some of I'm thinking about like our book club pick earlier this year, Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murders. It's like you have favorite characters, you have so much fun with it. This is just kind of an exploration. So I don't think there's a possible favorite. If you have one, share. But I would like to know, like, could you relate to anyone in here and in what way?
I to Annie because I have OCD. So the thought spirals in this book actually were very accurate to what happens. I don't necessarily struggle with the hygienic aspect of OCD.
The contamination.
Yeah. But like I have parts of that. So I definitely related to the OCD and I'm curious because my audiobook didn't have an author's note. I'm curious if the author actually has OCD because the representation for me at least was really well done.
I do know that she does. I don't know if it's in here, but I know that I've read an interview with her where she talked about it.
Okay.
For me, there wasn't anybody I related to per se, but I had a lot of empathy for Annie in her position. And I think just as a fellow Vietnamese woman, I automatically had a bias towards her in the story.
That makes sense. I think I have been diagnosed with OCD as well. It's not something that I currently struggle with as an adult, but I definitely did as a teen and a young mother. I think it really manifested a lot when I had a baby and a toddler, and mine was very contamination based. And so that aspect felt very real to me, especially the moments of like convincing yourself that something happened and you're just forgetting and your mind is like protecting you for something. I had to put it down a couple times because it was a little like too genuine of an experience, and it's not something that I've really dealt with for years. So I don't think I really need to talk about the representation of it because the author herself, this is something that she deals with, and I think everybody has such a different experience. But obviously I can relate to that, and it's something that it was a reason why I picked this book. Another reason I can relate to her is the parents hoarding situation. And I think that was a really interesting part of this. I think I can also relate to the challenges of raising a teenager. Like there was a lot of elements in here, although her life is so different than mine, her experiences are so different than mine, and the way she handles everything in life is so different than the way that I handle things. I can objectively relate to her in a lot of ways, I think. I think that's the only character I can really think of. Like, I don't know anybody else in the story that I felt that with.
But we all wanted to fist fight Tabitha, right?
Oh, absolutely. But I was like,
page one.
Okay, cool.
The thing with the kombucha, I was like, was this necessary for you to write? Because I am so frustrated.
I was so annoyed by her, and then I kept trying to check myself, and I was like, is this a valid feeling? Am I supposed, and is the author trying to make me not like her, or am I trying to understand, like, is she trying to make me understand Annie's feelings and why she's struggling to parent this child? But I was just, every time she came on page, I was so annoyed by her, and I was frustrated with myself for feeling that way. Oh no, not a little witch. Here's the thing. I think maybe they should have aged up Tabitha a little bit. I mean, I guess every child is kind of different, but 15 for the way that she was behaving didn't feel genuine to me at 15 or my child, who's about that age. So I don't know.
I just think it's interesting because like with growing up Vietnamese, like that would not fly at all. So it's like, why is she so grating?
Yeah, I wonder if it's because like if it's trying to portray Annie, since she grew up in such a specific environment, it was her way of like steering completely the opposite and trying to parent her daughter a different way, but still like ending up doing such similar things that her mother was doing. Would you have liked any other POV? Speaking of Tabitha, would you have liked to be in her mind more? Do you think that would have helped understand her?
No.
I think I think this will be an unpopular opinion, but I kind of would have liked to be in the husband's mind, just because maybe that would have accomplished the book's goal of being surprising to me. If we were, I always like being in a villain's head anyway, but if we had gone the book not knowing he was the villain, but still, if she managed to pull it off being in his mind and thinking that he was a good guy, and then it pulled the rug out from under us, I think that twist would have been more successful for me in that way.
I can agree with that because I felt like we didn't really know that much about him outside of what Annie was feeling towards him. And like, obviously there's that whole cheating plot line. It's like this whole book has so much of that. And so it makes it hard to know how to feel about him. And there's like a portion where he's just not even in the picture. So I would have liked to have been in his POV for a time. And also if it would have been done in a way where it wasn't obvious that in the end he was the bad guy.
Yeah. I think for me, a point of view that I think would have benefited the story is having like her mom instead of those like flashbacks just being a general like this is what happened when she immigrated. Like to see Annie through her mother's eyes, I think it would show so much better of a parallel between like Annie now as a mother. And like I think that blend would make so much more sense instead of just being like, here's the matter of fact of what like happened when she was being raised by her mother. I think seeing that through her mother's eyes as like an immigrant and like the struggles as a single mother would have been more impactful.
Right. We got the one. It wasn't from her perspective. Then it was just a flashback. I can't remember it, but there was the one moment where we learned that she had another child,
Yeah.
and he was sick and he had to be thrown overboard, which was such
Yeah.
that was like a reveal for me. That had a moment where I was like, okay, that explains her even more, because the hoarding situation, when you think about how she just wanted to collect everything and hold on to everything. As soon as we got that scene, I was like, that makes more sense for her character, because it's like she lost something so important to her, not only just her life in Vietnam and her, her family, but there was an actual like moment of losing a child that makes sense why it would then turn into like holding on to everything so tightly.
Yeah, and her
Treating
being
everything
so
as
overprotective of Annie too, like it was really real, and I really liked that exploration. And I was like, I've seen this reflected in a lot of Vietnamese War refugees, and I thought that she really handled that part of the story really well.
I definitely would have liked to see some more perspectives from her. I don't know like how, but then it becomes like a historical fiction, and
Yeah.
it's harder to pitch. Like I feel like a lot of people who love thrillers don't love the historical ones.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm speaking for myself. I don't pick up a lot of them.
Yeah, I don't either.
I think it definitely, like, as I was reading the book, it would have been interesting. Should we have gotten the therapist POV? That's such an interesting. Oh my god, that therapist.
I feel like she was breaking a lot of like
Oh yeah.
like driving her client, going to her house that's like super remote, and being like, "Oh, I was besties with your husband.
Yeah,
Actually dated him once."
Oh yeah, we dated. No big deal.
that's what I was gonna say. I'm like, I think you lost the ability to be her therapist the moment that you realized you were besties with her husband and dated him. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Because you're like not allowed to treat like people you know or like related to people you know. So it's like,
Yeah.
what?
Okay, well, with that said, what do you think could have been improved for me? What specifically would you have changed about this book? I think we already talked about like more POVs would have been interesting. When you think about this being a debut, obviously that's a challenge. Like anything that you add onto a traditional mystery is going to be a challenge. So I think perhaps she will explore so many more things as an author, and I will continue to read from her. But this specific book, what would you change?
I really struggled with the timelines. Not that they existed, because I appreciated the timeline flashing back to her and her mom. And I felt like maybe that would have been enough in terms of the timelines. But then we get that third timeline of like her and her husband meeting and the cheating scenario that she believes that she witnessed. It's not so much that I wish the timelines were gone, although like I probably would have been fine with just the mother flashback, but I also felt the transitions between the timelines were so jarring and confusing that sometimes I would have to like re-listen or reread a passage. And I was actually talking to Jenny about it when I was reading it, where I was like, wait, did this actually happen? Because I'm so confused. And it's just because of the way that things jumped, and she would just transition so quickly that I was never sure which timeline we were in. So I was often like rereading things. So I think the timelines really weighed it down, even though I think it could have been a really cool use within this story. But that was like my biggest issue. And then I wished that the timeline with her mother tied a little bit more to the overall reveal at the end, because it almost felt like the husband being the villain of the story was out of left field when we did have those timelines and we were reflecting on her mother. So I kind of wish that the reveal would have been different. How? I don't know. I'm not a writer.
Yeah.
I think for me, like a major improvement would be like a new synopsis, because I think the synopsis told us like way too much. And I think because you're expecting all of these reveals and it's a much longer thriller than what I've read prior, it just seemed like they were pointing us in a direction that was never going to come. And I think with the timelines, her in Hong Kong and like her with her mother, I think added a little bit more to the story versus the hotel jump.
Yeah.
It was just really weird because it was like she's laying in her bed with her eyes closed. And then we're in like a new chapter, and I was like, okay, like I'm not sure what that is adding. Like I'm not necessarily intrigued. I'm just confused at this point. And I think the storyline with her mother in the beginning felt like I don't know if it was my reading comprehension not being there, but it felt like she murdered her mother.
Mhm.
And so I was like, oh, we're gonna like find out why she killed her mom. And then
Right.
that was such a different plot. And then all of a sudden we had a plot with her husband being like this like mustache twirling villain. And I was like, what? I'm not sure where I'm going here. So it felt like two different stories in one book. And I was like, well, each of them were so interesting on its own. Putting them together I don't think it wasn't the right choice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I also agree about the mustache twirling villain and that the monologue just.
It wasn't just his monologue though either. There was another monologue by another villain, Ray, who was her friend Danielle's
Oh,
husband.
yeah.
There was also
Yeah.
a moment with him where he was like, "I'm gonna get you. Like you can never get away from that." Like I was like, we don't
Your
need.
wife knows you're a cheater, though. So, like, what's the point?
That's what got me is that we literally find out probably halfway through the book that the wife knows and she's like,
she's
he
like,
is
"Yeah,
who he is. And he's like, I'm going to blackmail you.
Like, okay, she knows though, so
Right, and he killed the dog too.
yeah.
No good. Okay, so what I think could have been improved is pretty much what you guys have said. I think just like for me, like it's obviously an overused trope for like the husband who you think is perfect to be the bad guy all along, but that doesn't make the book inherently bad. It's kind of like last year we read Riley Sager, and his main character was an alcoholic, and I know a lot of the people in the chat were very adamant that they didn't like that aspect of the book because it's so overused in mysteries, and I agree, but I don't think that makes the book bad just because it's an overused trope. And so in here, having the husband be the culprit isn't just the bad thing. It's how we got there and all of the clues leading up to that, because especially the fact that Annie like never really considers him at all makes it so obvious that it's him. And then to me, there were so many clues that made that obvious, like Gabe being the one who was poisoned. Obviously, the only person who's going to be jealous of that is the husband. He left for Syria for hundreds of pages in the book. Like, obviously, there's a reason for that. What else? I think like her cheating was my biggest issue in here because to me it was obvious, not just for the morality of it all, but because the only way you're going to even somewhat redeem the character for that is if the husband's a bad person. And then by the end it's like, okay, well it's not okay that she cheated, but like at least we can imagine a happy ending for her with someone else because her husband was a bad guy all along. So as soon as she even started talking about being attracted to other men, I was like, there's no way this author in her debut is going to make this morally gray character who we're supposed to hate by the end. There's just not a chance that she's doing that, especially when you have a character who's struggling with mental illness. Like, I just don't think that that's something that this book would do. And so as soon as she started being attracted to this man, I was like, her husband sucks. Like, obviously we're going to find out her husband sucks. So then we can kind of be happy for her in the end.
Yeah.
I think
I was telling Steph too, like the majority of her characters were POC. And I was just like, I think it would have been a little bit crossing, like it would have been like a little controversial for her to be like another person of color was the villain.
Right.
And so it felt like, unfortunately, Duncan is the only white guy there. So we're going to have to make him the villain.
I know. I really was so curious if she was going to go there and make our main character the villain. And only because of what Jenny said in the beginning was that I really genuinely read this as like she killed her mom and she's trying to remember how she got there. But then we kind of took a left turn. And I was like,
I was waiting for the scene. And then as soon as that happened at the beginning, and then she kind of had a couple of reflections on it, I was like, okay, she obviously didn't kill her mom. But it's still going to be a reveal. Like there's going to be a reveal related to it that it was an accident or it was, but like nothing really came of it. It wasn't a big moment for the book. And I was thinking that it would be.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see what other people are saying. Okay. I think most people are agreeing. I do want a moment. We're going to talk about favorite scenes and quotes in a second. So the people who really like this book, I don't want you to feel like you don't have a moment.
I'm very easily convinced. So if you tell me why you give it a 5-star, I can change it.
We'll rate it up. Oh my gosh.
That was funny about the daughter. She just flipped a switch. They had one little moment, a little heart to heart, and she's like,
she's like, my mom was shitty. And she's like, oh, I relate.
Right? I think I suspected Ike for like a second. I suspected everyone for a second.
Yeah.
I was like, it was Dr. Patel, it was this person, it was that person. There was definitely like enough red herrings, but because the husband to me was just too clear of a suspect, considering no one was considering him,
Yeah.
that's what was too obvious for me. Okay, memorable scenes and quotes. What's something that stood out to you that you enjoyed about this book? Because obviously, like, none of us gave it a 1 star. We've got things.
I really did like the flashback scenes between her and her mom because I think it gave a lot of perspective to Annie and like her OCD as well, and a bit about why it manifested the way that it did. And then I also, like I said, I would really love to see her do horror because all of the moments that are horrific, like the dog dying, which I don't love animal death, but like it was a really horrific scene. And so all of those horrific scenes were my favorite parts of the book. And I thought that maybe we would go a little bit deeper in the horror aspect of this. And I mean, it's not to say that I liked it, but it was interesting that this author wrote OCD in such a way that like I had visceral reactions to it because I related so much to it that I also had to put it down. Like this took me probably a week or a week and a half to read because I kept pausing to like pick up other things or watch something else because it would like give me anxiety. I told Jenny at one point, I was like, oh my gosh, this book is giving me so much anxiety right now.
Oh no. I'm sorry I've done this to you.
But it's like, it's so good when an author can kind of like get those visceral reactions out of you. So I think that she's just a really incredible writer, but like the structure of this book, I think there was just too many things, so that's why it fell flat. But I still would definitely read from her again.
One of my favorite scenes was the very opening with the prologue. It's, as like Stephanie was saying, like the atmosphere in there, the horror aspects, and like this air of mystery that she sets up from the very beginning was very intriguing. And I was like, okay, we're going somewhere. I'm glad she didn't kill her mom.
Right.
But like that plot line would have been like incredibly interesting, like exploring like generational trauma dynamics there. But I think she just sets up this very spooky and eerie atmosphere so well, and that's what I really enjoyed. And I think how she explored the mother-daughter dynamic between Annie and her mother specifically, all of those scenes I enjoyed, and even her unpacking it with Dr. Patel, like the therapist was telling her like mother-daughter bonds are so strong, but you need to understand that your mother isn't you, and you can work your way around separating those two identities. Like you are not your mother's trauma. And I think that was a very strong scene, especially like with Vietnamese culture. You are so entangled with the other women in your family. And I think having an outside perspective kind of voice that and say like, you are your own person too, despite being so entwined with your culture and your family. So I thought those scenes were so strong.
Sorry. Very eloquently described. Thank you very much. I think I forgot to tab this quote, but I'm going to say there was a beautiful quote in here that was about her mother and like coming out of Vietnam with nothing, and just the explanation of why she started hoarding, and that little explanation of how when she first came to the States, she found coins, and coins could be such easily exchanged for goods, and how she wanted to collect everything, and how this country was all about abundance, and how she started treating everything like it was precious, including like banana peels and trash. And I just loved that whole explanation. And then there was another moment I really liked when her friend Danielle was like, because she's like the yogi, she's like the health nut. She was like encouraging her to do all these things, and she was like, if I ask my friend Danielle for advice, she's just going to say, listen to your body. But if she knew the things that my body was telling me to do right now, she'd be so scared of me. And I was like, that is real. That's a real thing. I also just really liked the flashback. I liked the blackouts. I liked the explanation of blackouts. This book when you think about something that is representing OCD, I think it could have easily, and I did see one comment saying that they did find it repetitive, but I didn't feel that as far as her rituals. It could have really felt repetitive in that way because there were probably so many moments that she was doing things that we just weren't privy to. But instead instead of just saying like, I washed a bowl and then I washed the bowl again and then I washed the bowl again, it was like she was in the kitchen and her husband came in and he was like, why are the eggs burning? And she was like, oh, I was just looked away for like a minute and washed this bowl. And then she started thinking about it and she was like, oh, I washed it once and then I washed it again and then I washed it again and I washed it again. And I think that is a good depiction to me because in the moment you're not thinking about it. And then afterwards you're like, that was fucking crazy. Like, why was I stuck in that? Like, how annoying that I wasn't paying attention. And the blackouts felt very genuine. And then somebody said the scene with the car crash. And I agree. And the fact that we kept getting little flashes to that, like the broken glass. And obviously it didn't end up being the most dramatic scene of the entire thing, but getting the reason why the car crashed and her kind of having a freak out moment with her mom in the car, it was good getting that situation. I did enjoy the scene where she realized she did ruin the painting on purpose. The banana spiders gave me the heebie-jeebies. What's so interesting about that scene too is that they never came back to the fact that the husband got those spiders and used it to poison Gabe. But they said in that scene, oh, these spiders are known to create a toxin that like creates erections or something. And the whole plot of the book was that her husband could never get an erection.
I was too, yeah, like they talk about erections so much.
That was the reveal of the book to me, is when they were like, oh, the spiders make, and I was like, oh, it's the husband's pills. The husband, and then they never mentioned it again. They never said that's why it was not related at all. And I was so confused by that.
Could you imagine he was using banana spiders?
Her worst nightmare.
That would be a horror story.
Yeah. Like he's in the bathroom, like, please bite me a little bit.
Right?
We're good to go.
A little.
There was a lot of erection mentions.
Yeah.
And then also like a couple nipple mentions that were so weird to me because she was like, I don't know, she was like in the carriage house or whatever, and he was like, your nipples are hard, you're so horny right now or something. And I was like, maybe she's cold. Like, are you okay?
There's multiple explanations going on here.
Duncan is weird as shit.
Well, I also think that the husband is such an interesting character because I had seen some reviews talking about how like he was such a good guy to her, but I actually don't think he was. Like anytime her OCD was flaring, he would be like, yeah, you need to get that together. We got past this. And you're like, you don't really just get past
right?
I was telling my friend Amanda how he feels like he like got a TikTok account and was just on like therapy TikTok. It was just like, oh, you just need to like put yourself in your daughter's shoes, or you know, your mom has mental illness, like she has mental illness and you have no empathy for her.
Tell me why I just thought the author was here commenting.
Oh my.
I would simply pass away.
I would dip. Be like, oh,
Kayla, this is great, but I've got to go.
I just click an end button. Why would it stop? Oh my god. Okay. I guess this I feel like has come up, but I don't think I've actually gotten either of your answers because I've talked a lot about, like, I knew it was the husband from like page 20. Did you feel like that, or was it a surprise for you? Because I feel like the people who rated it high, that had to have been a surprise.
I wasn't necessarily surprised by him. I think I figured it out by the middle of the book, but I was so focused on I didn't read the synopsis first off because I don't ever synopsis things. So I was so focused on the fact that I genuinely thought this was going to go into like a horror place. Also, I was like thinking a lot about her OCD and things like that, and like how other people around her were handling her OCD. But when I started to recognize that this was more of a thriller, I was like, oh yeah, the husband did it. Like there's no other explanation. Like it doesn't make sense to where it was going and like the things that we were focusing on for it to be anybody else. But in the beginning, I wasn't really paying attention to that aspect of it. But it wasn't really surprising.
Yeah, I was able to predict it like for sure halfway through. But I think I was just so hell-bent thinking that she killed her mom that I really wasn't focused on it. But her mom kept on saying like he's an outsider, he's an outsider. And I was like, I mean, this is an Asian author. And I'm like, and he is the one non-person of color in the house. So I was like, well, it couldn't be Tabby. It couldn't be her. So
well, I convinced myself it was Tabby for a minute. I was like, Tabby had
really?
something to do with this because the synopsis talks about her protecting her daughter. I was like, her daughter definitely did something. I thought my prediction was that she's the one who threw the artist in the lake.
That would have been so fun because like she's just being annoying on purpose to like, cover her trail.
Right? I figured like somebody killed the artist. I was like, okay, well, Duncan killed her, and then maybe the daughter walked in on that happening and she wanted to protect him, and so she threw the body in the water, and that's why the police showed up. And I thought the police were going to be so focused on Tabby because
oh my God, you should have written this.
Yeah.
It was just because of the synopsis. The synopsis is so confusing.
That would have been so fun. Like
imagine
almost like an orphan kind of thing with the like, kid being the weirdo.
A daughter-dad duo.
Yeah.
What I didn't see coming is that Duncan switched out her pills. It never occurred to me that she was.
That was so diabolical. Mm-hmm. That was like pure evil.
I just figured she was like, I figured her OCD is getting worse and she needs to up her prescription. I didn't figure that he had given her placebo pills. Like that's so fucked up, but that's such a good.
And like, the way he casually just says it, he's like, yeah, I knew like you would start spiraling and then you would need to be put into like the psych ward.
Talk about
like, gas. What is your problem?
Gaslight king.
Yeah, I guess just because he's in the book, it's like, well, obviously it's probably him. Yeah, I think the people that gave it a high rating seem to have not seen that coming, which is fair because like you're so focused on Annie, and maybe it's gonna be one of those books that like a debut comes out and it's just like the main character is the one who's fucking stuff up. And I don't know if I would have liked that better because then you're associating like mental health with murder and like I don't want to go there.
Yeah, I was telling Steph, I was like, even if she did it, I still believe her.
I know.
Sorry, I'm still gonna believe her.
But I guess getting into the husband, like he also had trauma. Like so are we associating that? I don't know. Because my issue is like the character motivations were really questionable to me. Every single character at every single moment. So I spelled that wrong. Oh my God, help.
No one sees it. It's fine.
No, nobody saw it.
It's okay. I have dyslexia, so.
What about the suspendence of the book? I did it wrong again. Wait. Hold on. Some things that I look for in a mystery book are like the pace, the suspense of the book, the motivations of characters, the atmosphere, the surprises. I think we have covered a lot of this in the live show, but I didn't know we would. So this question may be kind of pointless, but I just want to know what you think was the most successful and what was the least successful.
I think the pacing actually was not very successful either. I don't know if that's because of the flashbacks and how I felt about the timelines being confusing, but there was a good portion of the book where I was like, why do we need this? Which probably was like the cheating part too, because I don't know.
Well, how else is she going to end up in the bed with a dead guy, I guess?
You're right. You're right. And then the successful parts, like I said, the writing and like the atmosphere of it and the horrific elements that she added in, like really, really worked for me and stuck out the most to me.
Yeah. I would say, again, the atmosphere was really well done. And I think the character work with Annie was well done as well. I think just what didn't work for me was the motivation for Duncan. Like, it just felt like he wanted to create this sort of weird, like, Asian wife kind of thing, and he was like, I'm going to control every aspect of my dog.
So cute.
He was begging to come up on my lap. But I just think that was the only motivation I could see, but it wasn't even revealed until the very, very end. There was no breadcrumbs there. And I think with thrillers, the fun part is to get these breadcrumbs, like questioning yourself whether or not you're just being hypercritical of like the husband or like if he's truly the villain. And I think those motivations were the least successful. It just sounded very almost like a caricature of like a racist white person, I think. And I was like, I didn't like the lack of nuance there.
Mm-hmm. I agree that it was the motivations was, if I had to like rank all of these in order, I think motivations would be at the bottom for me. Not just with Duncan, but mostly with Duncan. It's like, but why? Like, why was this something that you had to do? And why did it take you so long? Like, if, like, was she was so easily controlled, like really for 15 whole years. And then all of a sudden things just weren't working out for you. So you had to start killing people. It just seems like a little quick that he went there, but also the motivations with like, everybody who just accepted her cheating so easily. That's what was the most confusing to me. Her daughter, even when they had that conversation, she was like, well,
I get it.
I slept with a guy and now he's in a coma. And her daughter was like, okay.
Are you
like,
okay, Mom? Are you fine that the guy's like in a coma?
Right?
I'm like, what? You hate her.
She just so easily was like, okay, like you're going to get it. But the thing is, she hadn't even like filed for divorce. She hadn't even said, and she hadn't even told her husband. She hadn't told her husband she cheated. She told her 15-year-old daughter, who previously like they hated each other.
I know.
And now she's just like, well, I cheated on your dad. And then the quote right after that, when she was like, this was the first time I did something good as a mother. I was like, did you?
That you cheated?
And by telling your daughter you cheated before you tell your husband? Okay.
The cheating was so interesting because it was just like so normal in this way. It was normalized. Like everyone was just like never fazed by anyone cheating except Ray.
I think she told three different people, and they were all like, "It happens." I was like,
everyone was like, "Ah."
But we're supposed to understand him to be this perfect husband who everybody loves. So why is everyone so casual about it? Like Danielle was like, yeah, it happens to the best of us. And I'm like,
yeah.
Does it really?
I don't know about that.
Yeah, that's fair. It's just like the way that she had no reaction was what was crazy to me. She was like, okay, I guess you'll get a divorce. I'm like, there's like a dead man.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there is like a racial aspect to this story, but I don't think there was any nuance or like even spoken about the fact that there was a racial, like interracial marriage that they were in and that culture being like so different. Like the only person who ever reminded me was the mother's ghost being like, he's another, like he's not part of our culture. He's an outsider. It's like, thanks, Mom. Thank you for reminding me.
Like maybe not that he needs a motivation, but like maybe if you got to understand his motivation for marrying her in the first place, like maybe there could have been something there that was explored about why her and why he got into the situation, because like it feels like it had been malicious for so long to me.
Yeah.
But that wasn't really explained to us, I guess.
So it's wild how he just leaned into like some intense ways of killing people. He was like, you know what?
I'm not just gonna stab them. I'm gonna buy spiders.
Yeah, spider.
And like the person in Hong Kong, he put him in like a chute.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was like, what?
To cut off the dog's paw and be like, you know, I think I'm gonna use that later.
I'm gonna keep it.
Something.
I'm gonna put it in the fridge and I'm gonna give it to her later.
Yeah.
The spiders make sense because it's Annie's fear.
Yeah.
But the other ones, like maybe they could have all been more wrapped up in her fear, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess she did really, like, her dog was almost her child in a way. That was very emphasized, was how much she loved her dog. I knew when they started talking about the dog, I was like,
yeah, you're not making it to the end, buddy.
How dare you do this to me?
Yeah.
Oh God. Okay. So for me, it was the motivation's lowest. For me, and the highest, it was atmosphere. I think this was well written. I really think that she is a skilled writer, and that's why I will pick up more from her. I think the blackouts were done well. The scene with the spiders made me like uncomfortable. And then the flashes to the crash, like it felt very vivid. It felt very atmospheric, and I enjoyed that. Will you read more from this author? I think we've all said yes.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And final question is, do you have any recommendations for similar books or movies that you would like to share with the class?
I really racked my brain about something I've read that's similar to this, but I don't read enough thrillers.
That's fair.
So I genuinely have nothing.
For me, I have two. They're not thrillers, but I think these both explore like the mother-daughter dynamic so much more. This first one, take with a grain of salt because I've not watched this movie. It's Oma, and it stars Sandra Oh, and she kind of like moves to this remote area to get away from like she's basically running from her like Korean cultural background, and she's trying to start new with her daughter. And then her uncle shows up with the ashes of her dead mother, and she starts getting haunted by her mother's vengeful ghost. So I think that if you want more of a exploration between like mother-daughter, that would be maybe a good one, but I've not watched it, so I don't know how great the movie is. And then a book I would recommend that's more horror leaning is The Eyes Are the Best Part by Monica Kim. I think it ties so much into the dedication of You Know What You Did, because it's dedicated to mothers, daughters, and daughters who mother. And in The Eyes Are the Best Part, the main character does suffer a loss. Her father cheats on her mother and they're getting a divorce. And so, although her dad is not dead, he's like completely gone from the story. And she kind of steps up as an emotional support for her mother. And we see like this unraveling of her. And I think I enjoy that more because it was a much more active story plot.
That's a good one. I also have it right beside me as a recommendation. I think also because this is similar in a lot of ways conversationally, but like it's so not a mystery. It's just like an active thriller that is so interesting. I just realized I skipped over for the chat if you would read from this author again. So somebody said no. I just wanted to make sure everybody got a moment to say everything that they wanted to in here. This is something that is a reason that I will read from this author again is because this is such a lived experience, like her integrating like microaggressions and stuff. Birdie was such an interesting character to me, like a very real feeling character to me. The way that she was like would only use Annie's Vietnamese name as if it was like a sign of respect, but it was such a microaggression.
The way she was saying it was really bothering me. I was like,
and then to be like, what was she saying? She was saying like, oh, all Oriental people look the same though, in like the same breath that she was like, I respect you.
A perfect China doll. I was like, she's not Chinese.
It was like, but she so clearly, like that character thought that she was doing something, that she was being so respectful, and she was like, well, I'm hiring you. And like, it was so interesting that I think I would like to read more of these conversations from this author in other books.
I agree with that. I think that was one of the things I talked about with Jenny too, is that with the tie-in from the past, I thought we were going to have like a deeper conversation about the like casual racism that she was experiencing in a primarily white community. And there were some like hints at it, but obviously we never really went there. And so I would love if she wrote a book where like she really goes there and really explores it in a lot of nuance.
Yeah, and I kind of wanted her to be a little bit unhinged.
Yeah.
I mean, I think cheating is pretty unhinged, but like, in like a, I don't know, fun unhinged way, not like a morally questionable way.
Yeah, if you want the unhinged book, this is the one. I also grabbed a couple thrillers that have to do with like motherhood that I thought I could recommend. So I have My Lovely Wife by Samantha Downing, which is about a married couple and they have older children. They don't come into the story a lot, but like if you liked this for the family aspect and exploring all of the stuff between them all, I would recommend that. I also think Miracle Creek by Angie Kim you might like. It's a very, very different story. And it's like in a courtroom, but there are a lot of parents and they're dealing with their kids with autism and various other things. And there are conversations around like fixing their kids, or like a lot of conversations around like mental health in here as well. And then I think because No's in the title, this one. I Know You Know by Jillian McMillan. I just remembered that this character has an older child, and something happens with them. I gave it a 4. I don't remember a lot about it, but those are the ones that I don't read a lot of books about motherhood. In fact, like I steer away from them a lot of the time. So in just thinking about the ones that I have liked that have characters who are mothers, those are the ones that came to mind for me. And that's going to be it for, hold on, actually. I'm going to scroll through this later to see if there are any recommendations, because I love getting book recommendations from this specific question in the live show. But I will do that later at a different time. Thank you so much for joining and being here for the conversation hour. You know what you did. And thank you to my hosts. Please make sure that you go in the description and click on their channels, because they make great content, and they made time to be here today, which means a lot to me. And next time we will be reading Middle of the Night by Riley Sager, and we'll see you then. Bye.
Bye.